All right, so we factored that first expression. We factored that first expression. It factors this. Now to solve it, once we have it factored, we need to take our factors and use the zero product property, which we learned is just set each factor equal to zero and solve. So Jericho, what's one of my factors? This whole thing's a factor. What's one of them? This is one factor. That's one factor. We take one of our factors, y plus 12. That's what I meant when I said give me one of my factors. Just give me y plus 12. Okay? So our zero product property is we take that factor and we set it equal to 0. And then we solve for y. So solve that for y. Negative 12. So negative 12 is one of our solutions. Emma, take the other factor.
We have y, so it's 3 equals 0.
Set it equal to 0. Good.
Y is going to be negative.
Good. So negative 12 and negative 3 are the solutions of that quadratic equation. So look at the value of y that makes that equation 0. Both of them work. Okay? Let's do this one. I'm going to give you guys a minute to factor it. I will tell you before you can just start factoring as it is, you will have to move something over. You have to get it equal to 0 first. So, with this, first thing, Layton, what'd you do?
I moved 36 over.
Got to move 36, and what do you get?
2x squared minus 27x plus 36.
Okay, and did this have a Gray's common factor? No, it did not, so give me one of the factors.
2x minus 3.
And Spencer, what's the other factor?
2x. What am I already wrong?
What's 2x times 2x?
4x.
It would be 4x squared. We need 2x squared.
X plus. Well.
Okay. Let's check our OI. Oh, what's the hands for? Go ahead, Tom.
It has to be negative. It has to be negative as the same.
When this is a sum, because that is the sum, it means our signs need to be the same. So either both can be plus or both can be minus. So let's go with minus, and then let's check our OI. So Spencer, what's 2x times negative 12?
24x.
Negative
4.
And then what's negative 3 times x?
Negative 3x.
And then what is negative 24x plus negative 3x? Alright, go ahead. Spencer,
Negative 27.
negative 27x, which is what our B term is here, so that is the correct factor form. So then we can use the zero product property and set our factors equal to 0 and solve. So Sam, what's one of our factors we're going to set equal to 0?
2x minus 3.
We're going to set 2x minus 3 equal to 0. Let's solve that for x. So what do we get?
3 divided by 2.
3 divided by 2. 3 halves is an acceptable answer, or 1.5. Your question, or are you going to answer it? Okay. And then Keston, what other factor are we going to set equal to 0 as well? Good. So our two solutions, because remember every quadratic equation has two solutions. Our two solutions are 12 and 3 halves, or 12 and 1.1. That's correct. Good.
What are the things around your own hands?
For my regular class. That is one way. So one way is to solve by factoring. Another way is to solve by square rooting. What do you notice different about these equations compared to the ones we just did? They don't have a b value. These are the only equations you can solve by square rooting. Those without a b value. Okay? But the other ones you can't. No b value. Well, you might say, well, okay, why don't you just factor it? Well, if you look at like this last one here, we can't really factor it. There's nothing we can do to factor it that will work out to equal that. So not every quadratic equation can be factored. Alright, so that's why we can only solve by factoring. Not every equation doesn't have a b value. That's why we can't solve them all by square rooting. So for this, we'll look at this one. 4x squared minus 25 equals 0. So to solve this by square rooting, you'll want to do the exact same thing you did when you solved any equation. Get x alone. Okay? So we will add 25 to both sides, and we will have 4x squared equals 25. Many of you will look at this and say, hey, that can be square rooted, so I'm going to square root both sides. And the problem is, many of you, when you square root both sides, you forget to square root the 4 on the left-hand side. So I highly encourage you to wait to square root until you get the x squared by itself. Okay, so I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Now I'm going to have x squared, and I'm going to leave it as 25. Now that I have x squared by itself, now is when I want to square root. So I will square root both sides. And I will get x equals square root of 25 is 5, square root of 4 is 2. So 5 halves, or 2.5. The only problem is we just talked about how all quadratic equations are supposed to have 2 solutions, right? That's only one, so we missed something. There's an error we slightly made there. It's not necessarily a mistake. We just haven't finished it. There's something we forgot to do.
2.5 over 12.
You remember back from Algebra 1, this is x squared. Because we are squaring this x, 5 halves works, so is negative 5 halves. Because negative 5 halves squared is 5 fourths. So when we square root, we have to remember it's the plus or minus value. So this is positive. So x equals positive 5 halves and negative 5 halves. You could just leave the plus or minus symbol in front for your answer.
You know, like a plus with a minus sign out of it.
Yes, it's like an underlying plus.
Uh,
Some people write it this way. Plus or minus. That way works too. Some people like to write them both out, and they write 5 halves and negative 5 halves. That's okay too. Alright, this one you guys are going to help me with. We're going to do 3x squared minus 24 equals 0. Lucas, let's start with you. Let's get x squared by itself. So my first step is going to be what?
Add.
Add 24 to both sides. Doing so, we'll have 3x squared equals 24. Then Andrew, where do I go from there?
Then you can divide both sides by 3.
Then we can divide both sides by 3, and I'll have x squared equals 8. And Josh?
Then you'll do square root of 8 and make that positive and negative.
X equals, so Cassie, what are my solutions? Positive or negative square root of 8. Or it could be 2 square root of 2, or you could actually do the square root of 8, which is probably like 2.8 something. Yes.
so we can write down the square root of 8 in there.
Yes.
Awesome.
That's okay.
Makes me think.
Perfect. The third way we're going to talk about today is solving by graphing. If you have Desmos, it's super easy. And you might say, well, why are you teaching us? You've already taught us how to solve by factoring and by square rooting. Well, part of the problem is not all the time you can solve it by factoring. Not all the time you can solve it by square rooting. Some of the times you'll have to graph because there's no other option. This first one, we could technically solve it by factor. Or I'm gonna subtract 18 from both sides. And I'll have x squared plus 7x minus 18 equals 0. If I solved it by factoring, okay, we would get x plus 9 times x minus 2 are my factors, so x equals negative 9 and x equals 2 are my solutions. I'm going to show you how to do that using the graphing calculator. So the graphing calculator, I turn it on, I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to type in this equation. X squared plus 7x minus 18, and I'm going to hit graph. Check out my graph there. And you can see there are two x-intercepts here at negative 9 and here at positive 2. Great. I'm going to show you again how to calculate those. Because the ones that you have to solve by graphing, you can't count and know exactly where it is. You're going to have to actually use the calculate feature to see about where it is. So to do that, we hit second trace, which is the calculate. Second trace, and we call those zeros. Option 2, we want to calculate our zeros. And then the calculator kind of leads you through it. This says left bound question mark. First off, my cursor right now is at 0, negative 18, so it's down here at the vertex. So I'm going to move it. There it is. Okay, so here's 1, 0 that I'm trying to calculate. I want my cursor to be to the left of that 0. So I'm going to move it to the left of it. But it can't be on the other side of the vertex. It has to stay on that side of the vertex. So I'm going to hit enter. Now it's saying, hey, go to the right mountain. So I have to go to the right of this 0. So the right of that 0 is there. I'm going to enter. And then it's saying, do you want to guess? And yes, I do want to guess it. And it's telling me x equals 2, which we already knew. X equals 2. But then I have to do that again for the other one. So then second trace. 2, 0. Left up. So I'm going to go to the left. I have to go to my other 0. There's my cursor. The left of it is up here. I'm going to hit enter. Right of it is down here. I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to hit enter to guess. And I get x equals negative 9. Okay? I'm going to have you guys help me through that. We'll do this one. I know we solved it by square rooting before, but we'll do it by graphing. Alright, so the first step, Cassidy, in solving my graphing, what's the first thing I want to do?
Doing the fourth.
Yeah, we're doing this one. Yep. Equal up to 0 is already done, and then what do you say we do? Plug it in, that's it. So I'm going to type in 4x squared minus 25, and I'm going to hit graph. Okay, so there we can see it, but we need to calculate those values. So Hayden, how can I calculate those values? What do I need? Second trace. Option what? 2, because it's called a 0. Good. And then price, where do I go for that? Doesn't matter. So you want to find this 0? Okay, so we're going to go to that and find it. Okay, so tell me which direction I need to move my cursor to get it left bound. Right here's my cursor right here. So where do I need to put it to get it left bound? Do I go left or right? Go left bound. Left. Enter. Now I'm gonna hit my right cursor and tell me when to stop. Okay, is it okay that I want one extra? Doesn't matter. Okay, I'm gonna hit enter. And then what? Do I want it to guess? So hit enter. 2.5 is not what we got. Positive 2.5. Now, because we know the axis of symmetry is the y-axis, you could automatically know that the next one's negative 2.5. Well, let's say we get done that. So let's calculate Spencer. We're going to calculate the other one. So what do I need to do?
Put your cursor on the left side.
Not yet. Something I have to do before that. You have to go back through the steps again.
Oh, okay, second, and then trace, and then 2.
Yeah. Now we're going to move it. Oh, did I go too far? I know, it says where it's at. There we go. Okay, so I'm pretty close to that 0. So Leighton, how do I find the left bound of it?
I can figure it out more.
Okay. So right here is my 0. If you're struggling to determine which way is left or right, just move your cursor to the left 1 or 2. Okay, once you get close to that 0, just hit it to the left 1 or 2. And then hit enter. Okay? Now it says right bound. I always put my cursor back to my 0 or as close to the 0 as I can get. And then I hit the right arrow button once or twice. And then yes. There it is. Okay. I have your checkpoint quiz that I'm going to give you. Now, I'll tell you for your checkpoint quiz, you're going to go to the board and do it like we do with the other ones. For your actual quiz, okay, you're going to have one question. You're going to have 3 different quadratic equations you need to solve. And I'm going to say use factoring, graphing, and square root. But you have to use one method for each of them. Not the same method. You have to use a different method for each of them. Okay, so you're going to have to be careful which one you choose because there's only one of them that you can solve by square rooting. Then there's one other one that you'll be able to solve by factoring. And there's one that you have to use graphing because you can't use any of the other methods. So you're going to have to know all 3 of them pretty well and how to do them. But as far as your checkpoint quiz goes,